Mary Ellen Deener was born on July 27, 1951, in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. She lived with her siblings in Mansfield, Ohio, a place deemed very safe by its residents, and Mary Ellen was described by those who loved her as a responsible, active, funny, and bright girl who loved riding her bike, playing with dolls, and spending time with her friends. She and her siblings were very responsible and did what they could around the home to take care of various everyday chores. On November 14, 1965, 14-year-old Mary Ellen and her 12-year-old sister Brenda Sue were washing the family's clothes when the dryer had broke. So the girls decided to take the clothes to a nearby laundromat on Springs Mill Street, riding in a taxi there because their grandma lived right next door. Their mother felt safe with this because of that reason. Mary Ellen and Brenda arrived at the laundromat and threw the clothes into the dryer, but they ran out of change. Mary Ellen, being the oldest, said she would go to the next laundromat around the corner on North Mulberry Street to get some more change. It was less than a 5-minute walk away. However, she never came back. After a while had passed, Brenda started to worry because it took her sister too long to return to the laundromat, so she left and went to her grandmother's house to let her know that Mary Ellen hadn't came back yet, and the grandmother told Brenda to stay at her house and she would go look for Mary Ellen. As the grandmother was walking towards the laundromat on North Mulberry Street, she saw police cars and detectives near the road, and when she got closer, she saw the body of her granddaughter, Mary Ellen, bloody and defiled. She identified her on the spot with the detectives, who told her that it was too late when they arrived. Mary Ellen Deener had been shot twice in the stomach, and her head had been bashed in with a brick. It was so bad that her skull was shattered. Some of the coins for the laundromat were still in her lifeless hands, and some scattered nearby. As police began to investigate, they figured out which type of gun was used, and they checked the local hardware store in Mansfield that sold guns. When police ended up at the Diamond Hardware store on South Diamond Street, they found a weapon that was purchased by a Lester Eubanks on October 23, 1965, that matched the weapon that would have been used. There had also been some reports from people who said they saw Lester, 22, at the time in the area when the crime took place. Because it was a close community, one of Mary Ellen's sisters said she had seen Lester before around town but did not know him, and he seemed quite strange. Lester was a loner. He was also described by others as being rather cocky and narcissistic and extremely opinionated. Lester Eubanks was born on October 31, 1943, in Sandusky, Ohio. He grew up in the Mansfield area. He was a former Air Force medic, and he had been arrested twice before for 2 sex offenses. One was assault and battery on a minor female with sexual intent. Also, he had an assault and rape charge. Back then, you were not termed, but in today's time, he would have been considered a sexual predator. Eubanks was out on bond for a rape attempt when Mary Ellen lost her life. Eventually, police caught up to him on a Sunday morning, where they took him down to the police station, and he quickly confessed to the crime. Eubanks confessed to everything in great detail. He stated that he saw her in the laundromat when he was walking by, and then he seen her walking to the next laundromat. When she was walking by, they locked eyes for a second. Then he grabbed Mary Ellen, who was walking near him, and pulled her behind a house. After he snatched her, he pulled her skirt up and pulled down her underwear, but because she started screaming and putting up a fight, he took out his .38 revolver and shot her twice in the stomach before fleeing the scene. Then he went back to his house to get ready to go out to a party, and 45 minutes later, He was on his way out, and he returned back to the crime scene where the girl was still screaming out in agony and in pain, so he took a brick and smashed her head, killing her. Come May of 1966, he was finally convicted of her murder and was sentenced to death. Eubanks showed no remorse, and he never apologized for what he did to anyone. He sat in jail for 7 years at the Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus, Ohio, where his execution was pushed back 3 separate times for unknown reasons. But in 1972, there was a ruling that the death penalty should be abolished, so his sentence was changed from the death penalty to life in prison without parole. At this point, he was put in general population, where he did well, so he was able to be on the honor program and the trustee program. And with this program, you were able to go outside and do things for good behavior. On December 7, 1973, Eubanks, 30 at the time, was permitted to go Christmas shopping at a mall because of his good behavior in that honor program. But he never reported back to the check-in location when it was time to leave. Unfortunately, guards were not required to stay with the inmates, as they were able to be in citizen clothing and move about the mall just like any regular person. The first leads detectives had were 20 years after he got away in 1993, where they found out he was living in LA with a lady named Kay, who was his cousin's widow, and they had come to find out that they were pen pals when Eubanks was in jail. Detectives also realized, for whatever reason, the federal warrant for his arrest all these years was removed from the database, and no one knows why. So if he did run into the law, they would not have known that he was a wanted man. Kay said she was not aware at the time when she was his pen pal that he was going to escape from jail. She also stated during 20 years when he first disappeared, he went from Ohio to Michigan, where he painted houses for a couple of weeks. Then someone gave him money to get on a bus to California, and during that time, the bus got pulled over, and he just thought he was definitely caught. The police checked everything, but they were only getting on the bus looking for illegal fruit that was being passed from state to state. Kay said he then surprised her in LA, and he changed his name to Victor Young. He started working in Gardenia, California at a mattress factory until 1986, but when detectives went to check, he had already stopped working there. Kay said at some point she became tired of him because he was mean and bullying her, and she wanted him out of her life. So she lied and told him that the police contacted her, and he left and never returned again. At this point, the case was worked for a couple of more years until about 96, and then it went back cold. But in the summer of 2003, the case was opened again, and at that time, the detectives went to talk to his father, Reverend Mose Eubanks, who lived in the Mansfield, Ohio area. The Reverend said he would speak to the detectives, but would not talk about Lester. Reverend Mose went on to explain that he was frequently in prisons, and he would try to help inmates turn their lives around. Then the detective said, well, you know, there's nothing that can be done to bring that little girl back. But the detectives then asked, do you think justice was served in this case? Detective said he looked at them and said, people change and go on to start new lives. Then he said, I pray for Lester every day, and that he wasn't going to say any more about Lester. The detectives felt he knew where Lester was. Sometime later, a detective in Mansfield Police Department stated that an informant came in and said she was over Reverend Moses' house, and the phone rang and he stepped away. When he took the call, he then came back and said to the person, that was my son in Alabama. He was giving me a call while he was on his break from painting a house. So the police investigated it to see if any of Lester's siblings lived in Alabama, and none of them did. So that raised a red flag. and the detectives ended up getting a subpoena to get Reverend Moses' phone records, and they found out there were phone calls coming back and forth from a Center for Troubled Youth in Alabama. When they contacted the place in Alabama, they said that there was a person that fit that description, height and age and all, working there, and did not have a valid driver's license. And when they ran the social security number, it came back as fake. Then they found out that he actually left there a couple of months prior to. So, if it was in fact Lester, they had just missed out on him again. And it allegedly seemed that maybe the father had forgave him because he was a minister, but did not show the same forgiveness towards Mary Ellen's family in need and justice. This guy needs to be captured. He took a child's life in the most vicious way and admitted to it with no remorse, was on death row. He was able to get on life with prison without parole, and then he escaped. So there has been no justice for this child, and the scary part is he's still out there somewhere, assuming someone's fake identity, and we don't even know what he has done since then. So if you know anything or see him, please contact the nearest United States Marshal Service District Office or the United States Marshal Service Communication Center at 1-800-336-0102. And as always, please remember, stay woke. Things change quickly.